Okay, everybody, welcome here this evening. As an slóch mórsin eáil agus muid bailí na chéile an seo le lá na deanca orpacha cheiliúra an sa. It's a particular pleasure to welcome tonight's guest, Anne Enright, who of course made a very wise decision back in the early 80s to go to Trinity College Dublin. So it was one of graduates of whom we were extremely proud. Anne, of course, who is the author of 7 novels, 2 books of short stories and a book of essays on motherhood. She worked as a producer, a television producer, and director at RTE for a number of years before turning to writing full-time. She is currently Professor of Creative Writing in the School of English Drama and Film at University College Dublin. And she was the first laureate for Irish fiction, 2015 to 2018. She must have an extremely robust mantelpiece because the number of awards that have been conferred on Anne's work is quite staggering. But of course, one of these was the Man Booker Prize in 2007, Irish Novel of the Year, or twice, 2008 and 2016. She received the Irish Pen Award for Outstanding Contribution to Irish Literature in 2018. And she was made a fellow of the Royal Society for Literature, and her work has been translated into almost 40 languages. So tonight we are going to hear from the translators of 2 of those languages, which is, the ambassador quite correctly pointed out, 2 very important languages here to us in Ireland, because they are increasingly widely spoken on the island. So the first translator that I want to welcome tonight is Kaja Gucio, who is a Polish English translator and interpreter, over 20 years experience, translated more than 200 journal articles and papers, over 30 books, is a prize-winning translator of literature. And she does this remarkable thing, which is translating both ways, something that fills me with absolute trepidation and anxiety. The fact that you can, it's very exceptional for translators to work into both of their languages, but Kaja has done this very, very successfully. So she has translated Anne Enright's the Wren, and you, I think, have either completed the Paul Lynch's The Prophets.
Yes, I have. Yeah. It's coming out in 2 weeks' time, I think, yeah.
And 2 other Irish writers, Liz Nugent and Louise Kennedy,
yes,
you've also translated into Polish. Our second guest this evening, Iulia Gorzo, joining us virtually, began translating 20 years ago as a hobby. And then it became something more than a hobby, became your profession. You translated films and TV shows from English into Romanian. And among the authors you've translated are Cormac McCarthy, Paul Auster, Anthony Doerr, Alice Walker, and Frank McCourt. And again, you've won translation prizes for your work. So you have translated Anne's The Wren into Romanian, and this translation has been funded by Literature Ireland, which does such important work in terms of making sure that Irish writers are available in different languages in different parts of the world. And I wanted to begin a conversation this evening with translation, because this being our topic, and it's the opening part of The Wren, where you talk about this psychologist Russell T. Hurlbert, and he's kind of fascinated by the way in which people think differently, the different ways in which people think, and which is even more pronounced than we think. We all say, oh, of course, people think differently, but he shows just how radically differently people and the ways in which they think. Some people think in words, some people think in pictures, sounds, and so on. But then there's a kind of point where the where Nell is thinking to herself, well, if everybody's thinking differently, and there's this kind of this space between people, then she kind of thinks, well, how do people cross that gap? How do they? And then initially she thinks, well, maybe it's emotion that helps us to cross that gap. And then she thinks, no, we need something before that. And the word that you say, we need translation. So I wanted to...
Well, just to expand on that, Russell Hurlburt of Nevada is a real scientist, and he got people to record their thoughts at various random times during the day. And one of his subjects is a woman called Melanie, and she had the loveliest thoughts. They were all lovely. She was clearing some petals out of a sink. She at one moment when her beaker pained, thinking the words nice long time, or something equally nicely cadenced. Anyway, I mean, it is for me a problem of first of all of love, when you love someone and you find yourself thinking, what is going on in there now? What are you thinking? So it's in part a kind of desire for reunion from a kind of early sense of union and undifferentiatedness that's so delicious to us, I think, as human beings, the feeling of being joined to someone else, feeling of permeability. And it's not, it's kind of before and after boundaries, is this kind of emotion, one way or the other. How do you get to that? And so Nell is she's young and she's just realizing that she is a separate human being, and that idea of merging and melding into one single loving unit is not, first of all, there's something else has to happen, some understanding. She believes in empathy like a lot of people do, but anyway, a translation is a better word for me as for Nell than empathy. It seems to me a kind of projection that's pleasant rather than unpleasant, or sympathetic rather than unsympathetic.
So do you see translation then as something that's much more, this much more kind of agonistic, much more combative, that whereas, empathy is the idea of some, nice kind of pleasant being able to project.
Understanding, and understanding is really is enough, it's enough. It's a kind of independent-minded acceptance. So that both terms exist, both people exist, but they understand each other. So that sounds lovely, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, if you could do that in your relationships, you'd be set. Yeah. That would be it. Here I am, here you are, we understand each other. I'm not there yet. So, but that's not quite a rational, but it involves some kind of idea of translation. Understanding.
And just taking that idea of
some people think so differently. This was, if they're thinking about lunch, they might visualize the sandwich, or they might taste it, or they might, or they might just have the word sandwich, or they might have no idea, they just have a sense of sandwich. So even that far, I mean, even that simple a thing. So our minds work differently, and I'm sure it's partly environmental and partly genetic, but our minds are different, very, very different. You get it in popular psychology, the 5 languages of love. A cup of tea is love, or what means something to someone doesn't mean the same thing to someone else. We're always translating our actions, even within a relationship, to say this is what it means. So even an action needs to be sometimes translated in terms of understanding.
And do the the relationships that are in the Wren, so between Nell and Carmel, between Carmel and her sister, between the kind of the men and the women, Ronan, Phil, their partners and lovers and so on. Is it the capacity for mistranslation that fascinates you?
I mean, Phil is a poet, and among other things, he translates from medieval Irish. And translation is key to his mode as a poet. Because he's not a real poet, I don't think he just borrows things. That was a real, he could do that. So he wouldn't have to be himself in some way on the page, and that fixed a problem for me. But he doesn't need to understand. He looks into his own heart, and that's all he needs. He doesn't need to understand anyone else because he's a poet. He has a fantastic self-referential bastardy thing that writers have. Whereas I suppose the women are trying to understand each other more, but it's not really, it's most radically a problem for Nell, for the youngest person, who is the most porous. She's she's, apart from anything else, the most online. Her mind doesn't have, it goes anywhere. So it's part of her kind of rising sense of herself that it's, that she needs to understand other people. I don't know, it's kind of funny when you write these characters and then you ask to see them through a certain lens. It doesn't always pan out schematically one way or the other. And Carmel, the mother, doesn't care what people think. It's what they do that matters to her, because she's a very practical person. And you think that's just a human problem. I don't want to go on too long, but it's also a problem of the novel. It's a problem going back to the second letter of St. James, the difference between faith and deeds. If you believe something, is that enough? Or is it what you do that gets you into heaven? Right? So we live in a world now where ideology is very abstracted, very rhetorical, very fluid, and there's lots of it, there's lots of words. And I'm always calling my mind back to away from the rhetoric, away from the words, and to the deeds, say, what are the practical matters at play here? But that's also in a novel, is it enough to believe? Are your intentions enough? Are your actions the morality that's, are they more valuable or not? These are great questions to me still.
Kaja, talking about deeds and actions, one of the most concrete forms of act is to translate someone else's work into a language, and you've all kinds of intentions as a translator, and then what actually happens, what materializes on the page. So do you, when you were translating and the Wren, what were the aspects of the work you found most challenging in the novel, when you were thinking of casting it into Polish?
Well, it's the whole cultural aspect of translation here, I think, would be well, it's such a broad term, but this novel is set in a certain place at a certain times even. And so what do? Do I try to convey that, or try to make it more obvious to the reader, who might not be as aware of the differences, like to an Irish or even an English-speaking reader? Certain things are immediately easy to understand. Certain references, place names in general. I really don't like adding footnotes, explaining everything, especially a joke or something, because it kills it. So what do? How much of liberty am I allowed to take with the text? So these things. Also, I think one of the most important things in case of this book was to maintain the double voice, as it were. Yes. Because the two women, there's Phil, of course, yes, it was like a voice from beyond, or well, he was, but as I almost forgot about his existence, even though
he's dead.
Very much dead.
Yeah. There aren't three voices in the book. There's two voices on a dead guy. Yeah.
And I did try to convey that as well, because I think first of all, the differences in, I think it's in the type. as well. I think the different letters I use, the different printers used for Carmen and
For the poems.
so we had this discussion. Do we maintain it with the publisher as well? But Carmel for me was the easiest. I don't know what it says about me, but I find her voice the easiest.
It's the most straightforward.
But she's like, she knows who she is, and she has a very strong sense of self.
And she was really, she was really the hardest to write.
I can imagine that.
I felt so stuck with her.
But see, this is when you work the hardest, you make my work easy.
Yes. Well, that's an interesting thing. Yeah.
Now I'm thinking, it's not easy. It's just not
conventional.
Natural.
It's like conventional.
I understand.
Yeah.
How all the little, cogs in her head, how it worked. And it was very important to me to convey that and to preserve that in the text, but also to make it natural, because I didn't want to make her into a robot. Because I've noticed it myself, and I don't know if you've intended it. Like, is she's like on the maybe autistic spectrum, or is she supposed to be coded that way? But I've heard people asking me if she might be, or something. But there's a certain straightforward kind of aspect to that.
Literal minded.
Like yes.
So I don't think that I'd put her, if she was on, we're all on the spectrum.
Yeah, well, yes, obviously.
We're all on the spectrum. But there are many different spectrums, you know what I mean? Spectra. So no, you wouldn't call her neurodiverse. Yeah, but she's very literal minded.
Yeah.
Some people are. That put them on the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I found her remarkably reminiscent of a lot of the mothers in my neighborhood in Dublin, that very strong sense of herself. And
but the thing is, writing her piece to me was very like writing naturalistic fiction.
Yes.
And I don't know what that means. But I found her self-limiting way of thinking about stuff was present in a lot of ordinary novels. And I don't know why they wrote a whole novel in that mode. Do you know what I mean? I feel the need of the human mind to go places. And the fact that she's always stopping her mind from going places. Anyway.
Iulia, if I could bring you in at this point, what was your experience, with the different voices that we've talked about, and what were the kind of challenges for you in putting that into Romanian?
About the word challenge, actually, I was thinking before our conversation here that, and also hearing Mr. Romanian ambassador talking about the challenges of translation, I was thinking that as translators, we really love some dramatic language when we talk about our work. Sometimes we like to talk about how we battle certain books, how we struggle, how we barely survived an experience, an encounter with an author. It's all this language which I love, and I'm guilty. I used it many times, and I love it, because especially when we talk to the readers, because I don't like this romantic thing about translation that we just stay under a nice tree and we just wait for the muse, and it's all effort. Translation is a lot of sweat and a lot of effort. But if we I think if we over dramatize, we tend to forget that translation can be a lot of fun. And for me, the Wren, and I want to thank Anne for this, was not a battleground. It was a playground, and I want to thank you for this. Why am I saying? I think it also has to do with the way I view translation myself, probably the kind of translator I am, because I'm not very scholarly in my approach, I'm afraid to say. I think I'm one of these translators who actually is very preoccupied with the rhythm. When I first choose this project, I remember I started reading it, and I immediately understood in my head, all the voices made sense immediately. and I could hear what I would call the inner music. I know it's a bit pretentious, but it's what I could hear. If I cannot hear this inner music of the text, I cannot make a good reconstruction. So in this regard, I think this was great for me because all these characters have their own voices, and they were, if it's a clear sounding voice, it's easier to make the reconstruction. So in this regard, it was not so challenging, let's put it like this. What was challenging, and I heard my colleague Kaja talking about, yeah, I don't like footnotes either, and nobody likes footnotes. They just break a good rhythm. But what I found actually hard to translate was the Irish accent. How do you translate an accent? This is devil's work. When I see, and it was very, I will just give an example for your audience. It's a very important scene, I think, in the book where you have the character of the mother, Carmel. She watches her father, Phil, giving an interview to the American television, and she hears his Irish accent, and this touches her in a way, and she starts to remember him fooling around, and what we see, the author, and she's not only telling us that Phil talks in an Irish accent, but she also shows us how through spelling. And this is very tricky. So the word Wren from the title is spelled the normal way, and then we have the Irish way, the W-R-A-N. This is very difficult to do. I had to scratch my head a little bit. And so I hope the way I work is also with the rhythm. I cannot change. In Romanian, you cannot do the same. You cannot change one vowel and that's it. You did your job. No, you have to go to find a more creative solution to that. So I just shortened a bit the word so that I put an apostrophe, so to preserve the good rhythm of his speech.
No, or can you imagine it if it's easier in a Romance language or Slavic language? Is that it?
I don't know, but I'm curious if my colleague Kaja found it difficult as well.
Yeah, it's always a problem with dialects and accents, because Polish doesn't really, most Slavic languages don't really have that many, or that they are not that diverse, I would say. So for example, I translated Toni Morrison's Beloved, where there's a lot of very specific kind of language dialect use. And what should I make those people sound like Polish peasants? Well, it's ridiculous. So
exactly. So it's easier to tell what not to do. You shouldn't go too local, because the guy should still stay Irish if he's Irish. So he shouldn't be Polish.
But I think, you know, with Morrison, that mode of speech is, you know, is slightly elevated, and but also comes from the same tradition that the prose does. This kind of anthemic and lyrical, this kind of Baptist feel to it in Morrison, you know, so that the speech is just a kind of flowering of what's beneath, you know, the descriptive prose beneath. Do you know what I mean? That it's
You sort of try to get that. What I do, I think, what we all do as translators, is to try to make readers feel a certain way when they read a passage, and it's my job to use whatever instruments I have to make what's moving, what's funny, and not the other way around.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is, to clarify about what I mean about dialect, is that it should feel like the book, only more so. So it should feel like what the book is already doing, but a little bit more extreme, or more kind of.
With the Wren, it's easy. I think in Slavic languages it's quite easy, because we've got a lot. I don't know if you know it, but we've got a lot of consonants. We love our consonants. Just look up what the actually Wren is in Polish. You might be surprised, and so I just had to switch some consonants and made it quite natural. This is something that actually could be like a local version of the name, and doesn't strike you.
So this is wild to me, because sorry, so it's not mellifluous in Polish. Is that what you're saying? Not like honey, you know, because the Irish accent is often described as honeyed by and here too I use the word honey.
Yeah, it's not as, I would say, not
Okay.
as like lyrical.
Okay.
Just, on that point of kind of mellifluousness, and this is one of the things, of course, it's a tribute to Phil McDara, that this sort of invented that he's this kind of grand, lyrical style, and this is seen as very attractive elsewhere. What was it like to try and invent this poet? I mean,
I didn't. He was just absolutely there.
right.
I had no difficulty.
Yeah. So
Zero. It was like, oh hi.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have to do him now.
But was there a sense like when you're, because you're doing both his translations and you're doing
his prose.
yeah.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed doing his prose. I can't tell you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's my idea of fun is to do something that feels like it's written in the 50s, but is in fact written in the 70s, and it has all that bullshit in it baked in. It's like baked in, but actually also feels right. He actually talks about the fairies in the first section, about going to court the fairies with glasses of saucers of milk, and I said, I am just going to type up fairy, and that's going to happen now. Somebody got back to me because he spelled the she, the people of the as SHEE, so that spelling would be deliberately not right, because that would be how he would have spelt it. So you get very detailed in reproducing. It's like, to me, it's like old wallpaper or old lino or old curtains. Like, they feel so familiar, and they're just that little bit different. And so when I'm reproducing his writing, it was like doing a house in a modernist furniture, mid-century furniture or something. It was like, oh yeah, that'll go there.
So did you feel ventriloquized by?
Just don't start now about the models of where it comes from. Is it external? Is it internal? How near are you to the character? Does it flow? He was right there.
There.
He was right there. He wasn't in the room talking to me, but I could get him there. I could, yeah, I knew Phil.
And what about rendering Phil into Polish and Romanian, maybe, Maya, first?
Oh yeah, I had so much fun with him. When you said you enjoyed writing it, I enjoyed translating it, because it was just so much fun. I can't really put it any other way. I'm guessing you had a similar experience, because you can see all the bullshit. I'm sure you'd be happy to hear that I kept all the bullshit in Polish and added some more.
But it shouldn't be too obvious, it shouldn't be too obvious.
Just enough.
You
just
should
enough.
really go along with it.
Just to get the idea of who he is, because I think we learn, everyone's talking about him, his daughter, his granddaughter, there's the interview that is quoted throughout the book, but I think we learn more about him, even though he's not really, he is his own favorite subject, but reading between the lines, like, who he is by all
He's
the
a
little
fully
details.
complex. I mean, he's not insincere unless he wants to be, and he's very much himself.
The little jig that he does, that his daughter describes, tells me more about him.
Oh, he's dancing for bunting.
Yeah, the spelling of she, that tells me more about him than long paragraphs could.
He fell over on the hearthrug doing an Irish jig for a woman called Bunty, who was a friend of Kingsley Amos.
That's
You could do all that all day, and then the book would be no good because he'd just be doing that.
Iulia,
Yeah. I also love Phil, of course, because Phil wrote the poems, and I love to do the poems. It was my favorite part of the translation. Actually, I really enjoyed it. It was such a great fun, because at first they are a bit mysterious at first. I mean, when you just read them like this, it's hard to imagine how you will reconstruct them into your language. But then they add up, and then they add up. And Phil, I loved, especially because he is the hero of my favorite scene in the book, and I wanted to ask Anne about it. Actually, my favorite scene is preceded by my favorite poem in the book, which is called "The Penny Drops," and it is this poem about a badger, this animal, and it's pretty bizarre when you read it, but when you read the rest of the chapter, where we hear about his childhood, Phil's childhood, and there is the most amazing scene for me, a duel, a fight between a badger and some dogs.
Yeah.
And I always prided myself as being, Cormac McCarthy's translator. I'm quite tough. I don't mind a bit of violence in a book. But this scene was actually hard to stomach. It was greatly written for me. I mean, I worked on it just to make it as intense and in the original. I just wanted to ask, where does this come from? Did you see such, because it's pretty vivid, the imagery.
There's a short story writer called Boyle, is it? Patrick Boyle, who wrote a short stories called At Night All Cats Are Grey, with the Writers' Co-op in the 70s. And beached on our shelves at home sometime. And there's a short story in it called Meles Vulgaris, which is the Latin for badger. And it's actually very frankly misogynistic in a couple of paragraphs. And I think that's one of the reasons that I really remembered it. I would have read it in my mid-teens or something. But it's a description of a badger baiting contest. And at the end of it, he realizes that he doesn't love his wife. The way you do. It was just seeing an animal die, and you say, "Oh, my life is nothing." But that was essentially his end. I think his end realization. But the toughness of the badger, was just so moving, and I remember my father, who grew up in the country, would always acknowledge a dead badger on the road. He would say, "There's Brock," and he would call it by name, as roadkill or whatever. So I researched online, fuckers in Utah with sheets that they threw over animals they were catching, and some 19th century badger baiting. I got the barrel and the pipe. And I did the research. I did whatever research I could and constructed it from there. Yeah, I wanted to honor the animal, and so did they. I mean, it's all very primal. That kind of realization that Phil comes to at the end, that nothing is so intimate as the moment when the you're killing looks you in the eye. That is peak bullshit. Okay.
Yeah.
That sums up,
But it's great writing. This action scene is wonderful.
Thank you.
Just staying with the badgers and birds for a moment. It's one of the things that's, I mean, it's called the Wren.
Yeah.
One of the things I did think about, I'll ask the translators about this in a moment, is translating all those bird names into Polish and Romanian. But the way in which one of the kind of the arcs in the book is, a certain kind of sensibility, awareness of the more than human world, and which oscillates between the kind of the very brutal kind of unsentimental relationship to the natural world, which you find with the and Nell's intense kind of engagement, awareness of what that she's part of this environment and a world that's collapsing in upon itself. So is she to some extent reacting very much to her own circumstances, or is there something, maybe some kind of counter traditions coming down through Phil?
So it's something that happened in books maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was the polemic about climate change went. Because 10 years ago, it was an argument that this is going to happen. And at some unspecified moment, it shifted from persuasion as though this was an argument that had to be accepted or won or could be refuted, into a kind of mourning. So Nell is in mourning for what is lost already. And I found that a necessary and moving aspect of her youth, you know. So, so she looks at farms, Phelim as a farm, as matters of meat and slurry. And she mentions that he eats supermarket beef while the cows are ripping up the grass in the field outside. So she just has a different, very different attitude to the rural and the bucolic than nature poets do. But I think nature poets, like all writers, are very keenly alert to. I saw Seamus talk about this once, and he was so wonderful about it, but keenly alert to the imposition that is language on the natural world. So one of the visuals that I had on my kind of cork board writing the book was Adam Names the Beast by William Blake. Okay, it's a little watercolor, and it's that idea that naming is possession, naming is appropriation, naming is murder, as word is murder, and that whole idea that if you name something, you're replacing it. You're calling attention to its absence by replacing it with a word. As it's Slavoj Žižek says that words are murder. Word is murder. So that comes towards the end of the book. There is a kind of renunciation of language, which is what happens at the end of all books. You say goodbye, and Nell gets to a place where she can let the world be unnamed, and that is to me a great achievement, that feeling of being able to let the world be, and that's at the end of the book. Sorry, I can't remember quite what the question
No,
was.
you've answered the question. I mean, see, we're talking about names and unnaming, and so was that a very big challenge, trying to do the kind of the ornithological, variety that's in the, I mean, one of the poems called The Count of Birds, but
yeah, in a way, I'm sure you've had a similar experience, because sometimes you can change the name of an animal to fit a certain linguistic purpose. In this case, I couldn't. Because they were very specific birds and for a reason, so I couldn't. So I had to try to play with words. Sometimes I just I don't want to say I gave up, but it's better, I think, for the book in general to sort of navigate around it. And the reader knows that Nell speaks English, so she would use the English name. So I would sometimes introduce like a Latin name, then in English called something, and then repeat the phrase translating it, like fairy wren, the fairy. Why is it like it goes back to
See, the fairy wren is already a name that's been, it's a 19th century name. It's an Australian bird, so it went back to Murawudeen. Is the local, and the Aboriginal languages are so varied as well. So to that name, you're always translating.
Yeah, so this helped me, because it was already the whole act of naming, as you said, naming something, but different cultures naming them different. By the way, it's such a lovely bird. I had no idea it existed.
They're amazing.
Hours on Wikipedia. Really, I don't regret any of it. And so you work around it sometimes, but there's always a decision to be made. What is the priority here? And I think I knew I had to preserve the birds because they were important. So I tried to make it, but I also knew that it had to be poetic. So no footnotes, no explanations.
So Iulia,
how did I do with the birds? I did fine. I don't remember any difficulties in this regard, because here I was helped by my experience in television. I worked for 20 years in doing various nature documentaries. So I'm quite used to doing this bad thing that Anne talked about, baptizing things. So if I don't have, indeed, sometimes we have an endemic species which that lives only in Australia or in Madagascar. rare, and we don't have the same bird in Europe or in Romania or in Poland. And what do? We baptize it. We do the bad thing. We make it our own. We go through the Latin, through the scientific name sometimes. So we find the next of kin. And we try to, but in this book, it was mainly, I think, European birds, and they were not so hard to find. I don't remember, perhaps the Australian one, yes. But I remember I did something with it. I baptized it somehow. It doesn't live in Romania, but now it does a little bit.
Great.
One of the ways in which we can talk or think about translations is literally the translatio, the kind of the physical movement. I mean, the old centuries ago was the movement of the relics of saints from one place to the other. And I was just thinking about, both Carmel and Nell, they kind of physically transport themselves to Italy. There's one point of that they both spend.
Yes.
They both
I was
spend.
thinking of Our Lady of Loretta flying in our house. Some of the saints went through the air as well.
And of
Right.
course, often they would land in places that were waiting for kind of prime property developments, which is what happens in northwestern Spain. But so you got the two women at different moments, go somewhere
Yes.
else.
Phil goes to the Uffizi, and then they go to the Uffizi. Carmel goes to the Uffizi, and
and then Phil himself sort of, he transplants himself. He goes over to the United States. But it is like one of the things that seems to sort of certainly be at play there is that on the one hand is this intense desire to go somewhere, else and be somewhere else. But yes, this being perpetually caught up in the moment of return. I mean, Phil expressed that Ireland never leaves him or whatever.
I never left. He says.
You never left.
I never left.
Yeah.
And his daughter's going, oh, is that what you call it?
Yeah. So I mean, are you interested in that kind of just this business about whether, a sense of belonging is always needs instability, or whether a sense of belonging is always something that's very kind of rooted and fixed and static and
I mean that idea of emigration and return was keenly kind of interesting. I was very interested in it in the Green Road, and it's hard to reproduce now the sense that how exciting it was to get in a plane. Just the utter thrill of getting out of Ireland and somewhere different. It's just, and I think it was that island thing as well that so it's just so ordinary now, and we go in, and also that the online space means that travel is also altered in some way. But to me, it's always about mothers, or has been in the past, always about returning to the mother, so that Nell leaves and comes back to her mother's house. So, and there are a lot of very maternal real estate in my books as well. There are all these houses that are actually your mother. And I describe the interiors and all the rest of it. You think it's a page of Image magazine, but it's your mother. But it's the characters' mothers as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And is there something, because of it's the mother and then the mother tongue? I mean, is there a sense in an Irish setting that what constitutes the mother's tongue? Is this?
Yeah, well, you see,
deeply
Phil had all the words, and when he died, he took all the words with him. So it's very much more the father words, whatever you'd call that. So I know what you'd call it. So it's but it's very patrilineal or whatever. So language, Phil has the language. And when he dies, the women feel that he has taken all the words with him. And I wrote that sentence, and I thought that doesn't make sense. But sometimes you write things that don't make sense. You think I'll leave it there because it makes a different kind of sense that I'm not kind of totally aware of yet. So you could explain it socially that female speech wasn't valued. You could talk all you like, but it didn't mean anything. It didn't stick to anything. It didn't move anything in the world. So that female speech happened, but it was just rhetorical. It didn't have any effect. But in Phil's case, it's much more serious what he's done with language. It's like he sucked all the language out and away from the women at that point at his funeral. Yeah.
And Kaja, when you're translating Anne's work into Polish, I mean, is that connection between kind of language and gender something you're very, very aware of and trying to give a particular resonance to that?
In terms of style, you mean?
Yeah.
Because in Slavic languages, I don't know if it's the same with Romanian, but we have gendered verbs, which makes my life hell. Like I work, my life is fine, thank you. But it's the same with some Romance languages, I think. So you cannot say I did something without revealing the gender of the speaker. So sometimes you have to dance around it. That the language itself tells you who's speaking, which is in English you don't have to.
Very economical though, because you don't always have to be saying he said, she said.
Yeah, you don't. But
Yeah.
like imagine the what was it, Janet Winterson, I think, or then the novels written when you are supposed to wonder who is speaking, is it a woman or a man?
Orlando.
Yeah,
By Virginia Woolf.
yeah, exactly. And so you have to sometimes play with words quite a lot, and in terms of style as well here, because the three voices that the two living voices and the dead one in many ways they are very distinct, and also the gender, or rather how they operate with words, how they use words, how they use language is, I think, very evident in the book, and I tried to preserve it as well. I could literally hear Phil's story. Like I could imagine, probably we've all met people like that, men like that, and so I think I tried to keep that without being too artificial about it. I didn't want to make it too mechanical to read, but I think yes, I think you can tell if it's his or line or one of the women.
It's just a mood. It's almost just a mood, you know, as much as language choice.
Yeah.
It's very hard to catch where it is.
Yeah.
But if you have it in your head when you're working.
It's emotional. It's a kind of, to me, translation is reading, very, very careful, very deep reading. So I tried to read like what the character is telling me and then convey it hopefully successfully. I don't know.
Iulia, I mean, is that, you know, I mean, you're working with a Romance language, that question of this sort of how different genders, you know, occupy the language. Was that something you were thinking about when you were?
I'm thinking about, but here in this novel, usually the answer is in the novel, is in I don't do anything else than the author did. So if it's here indeed the novel is loud and clear. So you have these three voices, two feminine. One is this extraordinary super mom. I love the way she's described, Carmel, the way she's described like this fierce mom when she protects her child. She yells at the guy with the ski jet, and she sets fire to the house of the pervert in the bus. I really love. So it's very distinct, her voice, and also the voice of Nell is very distinct. So it's easy with in Romanian to render these two feminine voices, no problem. I didn't find any difficulties, but it's because it's there. I didn't have to think a lot about it. But it is in our language, yes, it's genderized. You have the feminine, the masculine. You have to think a little bit what you choose. It's not like yes, it's not like in English, but it's Romanian is not like English at all. It's not as synthetic. You have to sometimes say a lot more for the same small English line. I don't know if Polish is the same. Yeah. Yeah.
And it always comes in shorter. So, I mean, one of the ways I test a translation is by looking at the thickness of the book. And if it's very thick, I get worried.
That's a good one.
German adds 20%, you know. I mean, it adds 20% to the page numbers, you know, so.
Germansplaining.
Hmm?
Germansplaining.
Germansplaining. Yeah.
But also
So-
they get paid by the target
Okay.
page, so.
Oh, okay, maybe they're
so
just making more
translates,
money by making things up in the middle. It's starting really. Yeah.
Talking about Carmel, because she's been mentioned. I think you read a
Oh, yeah, I read-
passage,
Yes.
from the novel.
She gets a lot of recognition, Carmel, and everyone seems to know women like her. I mean, I'm glad she exists in Romanian and Polish places in her, just, you know. My mother is a very practical person, and I don't know how to describe it. For Carmel, there's either a problem or no problem. Anything else is you're making it up. She could never get my friend Maya, for example, when we were little. I mean, she was friendly, she was nice, she provided ice cream, which Maya refused. But as soon as her mother took her home again, as soon as the front door closed, Carm rolled her eyes all the way to the back of her head. That child, she said. I'd say, what? She won't eat ice cream. It hurts her teeth. What? My mother is strongly of the opinion that if you don't think about yourself, then you won't have any problems. For Carmel, having a pain means you are self-obsessed, because being self-obsessed comes first and having a pain comes second, or an allergy, an intolerance, and a sensitivity even. She might allow someone to have an allergy if they are, for example, in anaphylaxis and groping for the EpiPen. But when I was little, she did not believe in food intolerances, as though her belief was the deciding factor there. People who have these problems deserve to have them, according to Carmel, because these people invented them. They have too much imagination. She's quite an infuriating person. You can't shout at my mother the way Maya used to shout at her mother, Brona. That seemed to me like taking a shit in the middle of the floor. Not right, of course, but tempting. No, if you shout at Carmel, all the lights go out one by one. It's like watching Manhattan die. Not that I haven't brought Gotham down in my day. I have shouted, she has shouted. We have wandered around in that big city blackout as a lady calls for her little dog and the distant sirens go whoop, whoop. No. Much as I love my mother, much as I love that fabulous fridge and free heating, the coffee grinder with whole organic beans, much as I love reading on the sofa while she shifts and grunts over her Sudoku, I really need to get away. So that's yeah, it sounds like Carmel when she's talking about Carmel. She's channeling her mother there.
Well, I think there's always a moment where, you know, we find ourselves kind of enacting the roles of our parents, or sounding exactly.
Even as we're imitating them.
Even as we're imitating them, absolutely. And this is a moment where we open up our discussion, which we've been having here, the four of us, to the floor. So this is the moment if you have any question or comment. The only thing I ask for is brevity. Because that's more democratic, so everybody gets a chance to.
Could you explain to us some of like the process you go through when translating?
As a question for me, the process is quite simple. My cat sits in my lap. I turn my laptop on, just pull up the original file, pull up the very scary new file, new for a very long time, and then I just go on. That's it. I read the book first. There are different approaches to it, and sometimes I just skim. It's boring. In this case, I just read it, the whole thing, then read it again, and then I make notes that I think like problematic areas. like I remember the note that I made first, and I think it was the last thing that I finished was there's this reference to love actually used when this the name of the county, which I cannot pronounce.
Loud,
Loud.
actually.
Now that was the
Why
first
do I do these things? Yeah, that's Nell, that was her
Yeah.
joke.
Now in Polish. It's a different word for that.
Yeah,
I switched the counties. Meath.
he's from
In
me.
Polish is miłość is love, and the title of the film is To właśnie miłość, which is basically love
Okay.
actually. So that was probably the last thing I did after proofreading the whole thing. That was the last decision that I made. Okay, I'm just switching. I looked it up.
It's translatio.
I checked.
Actually, it's on the border there. He's on the border. I mean, because the Neolithic remains are the same in Meath, but Meath is a posh county in Louth. This is.
Oh, is
that's
it?
the only one.
I did research. I did research. There's
Yeah.
also some cows in there. There's a lot of
There's no cows in
agriculture
Meath.
there.
Yeah, no,
I
there's
think
cows.
that
Yeah.
was important part, so they could live there possibly. For some time, I knew a lot about the
North Meath.
yeah. Well, the details may have
No, but it's
escaped me.
astonishing how specific your imagination is.
I had to. That's desperation. That was just this is how it works basically. So you start, then you cry, then you curl in a fetal position for a while, and then you just the deadline is looming, so you have to finish.
I can hear the hum of Twitter traffic, from Meath and Louth. As this broadcast is going. Iulia, you have a
About the
question here about-
translation, I have a very practical approach to translation. I just get up and do it every day. I just establish a portion or just it depends on the novel, of course. If it's a very difficult one, like 3-4 pages, 3-4 pages on an average, I just get up and do it. But of course I read the book first. First of all, I cannot choose to do the book if I don't read it. Yes, it's a very superficial read at first, and but at least I get familiar with it, and afterwards I read I don't know how many times. So if it's boring, I never choose boring stuff because I read it many times. I read every day to remember the rhythm, to get back into the rhythm. I read both a little bit from the original, and then I read my own translation from the day before, so that I get both rhythms. So if it's boring, it's very bad. I never choose boring stuff. So, but that's it, and I just do it, and it's just part of my day. But it's my favorite part of the day, actually, doing fiction novels. It's my favorite part of the day. I can't wait for it to start. Usually.
I'm just a question over the years. I mean, what about your relationship with your translators? I mean, have you sort of got to know some of your translators in different languages, or do they turn up at your door at Saturday night?
Did you mean by?
I've had conversations over the years. I do remember standing in a phone box in Achill Island, and surrounded by kind of storm, talking to a German translator many years ago about maybe my first novel. I think that was Jürgen Schneider, and Hans Oesser. I have met a few times in Germany, and I can appreciate he has a good cadence. It's all for me about the cadences. I think we've talked about cadence here, getting the rhythm, and I can see. I haven't early on. In French, I had a very strange relationship with the translator, who explained to me various things, including the fact that she did sex work on the phone as well as translation. It's just you do kind of worry about the intimacy in the book, that it's so is the word valent, that people translate it according to their own lights, and some of those lights can be very far from your own. Okay, so I was thinking, why is this person doing sex work on the phone? What is she making of my book?
It's transferable skill.
It was so. You can't control the eccentricity of the encounter, put it that way. But also in that translation, and I think it might have been a function of the French, is to make the book more lyrical than it is. I know there's quite a lot of lyricism in the style, but there's also a lot of counterpoint. There's also a lot of semicolons, a lot of turns, a lot of modifications and digressions and things in brackets and parentheses and whatever. So there's a bit of a kind of slow, quick, slow about the rhythm. There's a bit of digressive kind of dancing energy to it, and lyrical energy can just go la la. It can be very lady, it can be very lovely, but it doesn't get the spikiness of what I need with the vocal agility of some of my narrators, put it that way. So the French can become kind of lyrical. I don't know why I told you that story about the sex work on the phone. It's just, you just don't, you put a book out into the world and then you go and write another book. That's the rule.
That's right. Okay.
For the question with translating, that if the original work had an editor, am I right in understanding that the translated work cannot have an editor because the editor would need your skill set? And who is that?
Yeah.
So it's you, and it must be quite isolated. And when do you know it's finished? But there isn't an editor.
It's never finished.
Yeah.
It's never is. I'm afraid to look into the printed book because I know that I'm changing everything. Yes, I do have. The translated book goes through 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs of eyes. Mine first, then the editor. And yes, as you said, but English is I was going to say easy language. It's a fairly popular language, let's put it that way. So it's quite easy to find someone who can at least get the gist of the book in the original, and is hopefully better at Polish than me, because that's the idea. But it's like the very act of translating is a solitary experience, as you said, not counting my cat, but then everything that happens afterwards is a dialogue of sorts, because I think it's not nice to sort of have a sounding board, as it were, to discuss some ideas, because I might think that this is the funniest joke ever, the best idea ever, usually isn't, and my editor is the person who tells me. And then there's proofreading, and then another proofreading. So there's several people. So I think this is more thorough than the original sometimes. It's not. It has to be, because then it would be my own reading, which is never a good thing, because it has to be, I think, at least put through a sort of trial run.
Yeah, no, I'd have one editorial meeting and then the proofs go on forever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think time for just one more quick question. Are you been waiting a long time there? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question also about translation, because you mentioned how you do like a first superficial read of the book. So I was wondering whether your first impressions are often then changed by the process of translation of characters or certain moments, or
I was lucky enough, I think, so far. So you're asking me, but I think
yeah.
Iulia, I'm sure it has also. Yeah. It's usually, yes, it usually stays with me. The voice that I hear, I was lucky enough to translate a lot of good literature, and the voice that I hear during the first read is usually the one that stays with me. Yeah.
Iulia, your experience?
If the voice changes, or if the impression changes, if the first impression, of course, some things change. You can get mad basically, which is what happened to me when I was translating Blood Meridian, so which is legendary for its violence, and I nearly got mad. And it's also about the question before, when do you know it's finished? Sometimes you get so mad that you read, and then you read again, and you read again, and you read 10 times, and you get mad. So you just what saves you is the deadline, and also the other team of professionals. So sometimes, yes, it can change you, but not the impression. I mean, not the general impression. If it's a good book, it's a good book. It stays with you, not the voice, but your relationship to it can become pretty obsessive, or yeah, you can become pretty obsessed.
Do you mean maddened by the difficulties, or slightly
Yes,
psychotic given the
by the
material?
if it's a very difficult book, it can haunt you a little bit. Especially when you are a beginner, I think, because now after 10-15 years, you have you know your mechanisms to defend yourself. But for a beginner, I talk to a lot of young translators, and they say, I wake up during the night and I just remember that I did something wrong, and I'm so obsessed with it, and yeah, it can get to you, to your head. Yeah.
Is it a conversation or a possession? My question, is it a conversation or a possession? Are you possessed by the book? When you say it's a struggle, I'm just how dialectical is it?
This was a very happy experience for me. It was really a happy experience from the day I started to read. Was really good. I befriended everybody, including Phil.
Yeah.
I think that what we've had this evening is a kind of it's where conversation meets possession. I think there's a kind of a sense in which what was so striking in Anne's contributions, Iulia's and Kaja, is just the extent or the sense of which you can be inhabited and possessed by various forms of creation and the different ways that they manifest themselves. So what I would like to do on behalf of everyone here is to thank Iulia, to thank Kaja, and to thank Anne for their generosity in sharing their experiences of writing and translating this evening. This is something we do once a year, and I have to say it's certainly for us in the Centre for Literary and Cultural Translation, it's one of the highlights because it feels genuinely dialogical. It feels like a genuine conversation as opposed to the kind of the stand-up lecture, the kind of the verbal narcissism that goes on forever. So this is gloriously punctuated by very, very interesting exchanges.
So can I thank you, Michael? But can I also thank Iulia and Kaja for doing great things with my book? I really appreciate it. So I just want to make that very clear. Thank you.
And we can say thank you for writing.
Yeah,
we wouldn't have any jobs to.
And thank you all for coming here, because otherwise we wouldn't have